For this debate has expired. The Honourable Cherry Brownlee.
Mr Speaker, I move that extraordinary urgency be accorded the introduction and passing of the Excise and Excise-Equivalent Duties Table Tobacco Products Amendment Bill. Mr Speaker, the bill's title is somewhat self-explanatory. It is a move that's being taken in the interest of public health, and the speeches that I'm sure will come from members across the House will indicate the feeling that there is that this is a move that should help to stem the large numbers of people who are taking up smoking and encourage many of those who do to remove it. I know that I'm, in saying that, straying into the debate. Procedurally, sir, it's desirable that this bill is passed as quickly as possible in order that it can be given assent and that the new tax provisions can be applied.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The Honourable Cherry Brownlee.
Mr Speaker, I seek leave for the Excise and Excise-Equivalent Duties Table Tobacco Products Amendment Bill after its second reading to be set down for third reading forthwith without debate.
Leave is sought for that course of action. Is there any objection? There is none. The Honourable Cherry Brownlee.
Mr Speaker, I seek leave for the dinner break today, notwithstanding the provisions under the extraordinary urgency arrangements to be from 6 p.m. until 7:30.
Leave is sought for that course of action. Is there any objection? There is none.
Excise and Excise-Equivalent Duties Table Tobacco Products Amendment Bill introduction.
The bill is set down for first reading forthwith. The Honourable Tariana Turia.
Speaker, I move that the Excise and Excise-Equivalent Duties Table Tobacco Products Amendment Bill be now read a first time. Mr Speaker, there are only a few matters before this House that one could stand with hand on heart and declare that this was a life and death debate. The rationale for rising the tobacco excise is very much in this arena. It is purely and simply about saving lives. I come to this bill with many mixed emotions. As Associate Minister of Health, it worries me greatly that about 21% of all New Zealanders over the age of 15 years old are smokers. Many are younger. In basic terms, 1 in 5 New Zealanders are regular smokers. It is irresponsible to dismiss this as a recreational pastime to minimise the impact of harm caused by justifying tobacco use as a private pleasure that one should be free to indulge on in the privacy of one's home and not acknowledge the addictive nature of this tobacco use. Exposure to home and the tobacco and exposure to smoking in the home and tobacco use itself results in a staggering figure of around 5,000 deaths a year. In graphic terms, I can put some names to these numbers simply by walking along the gravesides of our family urupa. The focus of this legislation, tobacco use, is the single largest cause of preventable death and chronic illness in this country. It would be a foolish government to ignore the economic and social repercussion of this relentless killer. And yet for too many years it appears that we have been prepared to turn a blind eye to the crisis that afflicts our communities right throughout this land. Actions have been infrequent and erratic. Years have elapsed while debating minor changes. In all that time, the death toll has kept on rising. New Zealanders dying prematurely from smoking-related illnesses that show no mercy. We cannot stand by oblivious to the pain that strikes too many families. Early deaths which are completely preventable. The science tells us that on an average, a smoker loses 15 years of life. And it is no news to anyone in this House that tobacco is the leading cause of life expectancy gap between Māori and non-Māori. It is soul-destroying to know that 1 in 2 Māori women smoke. The disproportionate impacts of heavy use of tobacco on Māori are etched into the lives of many whānau. During the period 2000 to 2004, lung cancer was responsible for over 31% of Māori cancer deaths. During the same period, cardiovascular disease, including heart disease and stroke, resulted in Māori death rates which were 2 times higher than those for non-Māori, and deaths due to respiratory disease were 3 times more frequent in Māori than non-Māori. It is impossible in that context to come to this debate with views about the nature of the product per se. Day on day, approximately 13 New Zealanders die from smoking. They die from lung cancer, they die from heart disease, from strokes, from chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, from emphysema, from chronic bronchitis, from cancer of the mouth, pharynx and esophagus. They are dying from a habit that we can do something about. So today we are taking this action to save lives. Mr. Speaker, I was by my mother's side when we got the diagnosis that her cancer had progressed to such a stage that she might have 6 months to live. My mother had been a heavy smoker for some 40 years, but even though we all understood that the risk that comes with smoking-related illness, there is nothing quite so traumatic as having to sit and watch the life of your loved one slowly drained. My cousins and I were raised by my grandmother. Every single one of those cousins has died from smoking-related illness. I am the only one alive of those who were raised by my grandmother. This story, my story, is not an isolated individual case. For the sake of our future, we must act. This bill is part of a coordinated range of measures which target tobacco use as a leading cause of preventable death in New Zealand. Independent research studies have established the impact of price rises on smoking prevalence and tobacco consumption. Raising the price of tobacco is probably the most powerful tool to reduce smoking. International organisations, from the World Health Organisation to the World Bank, recommend that countries use tobacco taxes to increase the price of cigarettes and counter the global smoking epidemic. It's very simple. All smokers who buy tobacco will face the price rises. The more someone smokes, the more they pay, and the bigger the incentive for them to quit. The government is concerned that cigarette prices have plateaued in recent years and that cigarette consumption has also stalled. That is why we are putting the tobacco excise up in 3 steps of 10% over the next 2 years. The government is also concerned that roll-your-own tobacco is increasingly seen as a cheaper alternative. That is why we are putting the excise on loose tobacco up by an additional 14% to equalise the excise weight for weight with manufactured cigarettes. Roll-your-owns are no safer than tailor-made cigarettes and may indeed be more harmful because roll-your-own smokers will often inhale deeper to make the cigarettes go further, or so I am told. Mr. Speaker, this issue is of such severity that we must accord it urgency, and I personally regret that, given the circumstances, that I have been unable to give other parties sufficient advance notice prior to the introduction of this bill. But I do feel assured that from previous statements made from the parties around this House throughout the years, that all of us understand the perilous situation that we face. The stakes are too high and we must act decisively, and this bill is an important step in that pathway forward. I commend this bill to the House.
The question is that the motion